Ben's title to this chapter, I found kind of amusing, I'll admit, because of the verse that it's derived from, the last verse of the Song of Dharma Nature, which is, "This original stillness is named Buddha." So, and the title Ben gives it is "Buddha is Still Here." So I chuckled because you take it either of two ways. Kind of like when I might call downstairs and say, "Are you still here?" That sense. Or more in keeping with the line, "Buddha is still here." Not entirely sure which way Ben meant it, actually. I'd like to think it's the second way. Because it's more fitting, and that's the way I'm going to take it. Because in that sense, it'd be a beautiful way for us to kind of start our day, a nice mantra, beginning a period of zazen you might be doing. Buddha is still here. And almost ask it a question. Is Buddha still here? And then go ahead and launch into whatever you're doing, including perhaps a period of zazen. So this sense of stillness and the recognition that it's within, hence the thing about here, not around me. Because as I've mentioned before, at Whitehaven, this comes up regularly. We had it today. There was construction going outside. So I kind of bring this whole concept in right there, that it's within us, the stillness that we're meditating with, irrespective of what's going on around us. Which means we don't have to be doing sitting meditation. We could be cooking if it's a zazenkai and you're the tenzo, or you could be cleaning the kitchen afterwards, or you could be doing any of a number of different chores in the course of the day. But it's still a matter of this quiet within. In other words, a clear mind is a quiet mind. So Buddha is still here, wherever here is and whatever the circumstances are. Which is why it's this original stillness. That's Buddha. Original and timeless. So it's not original in the sense that, there's been a steady string of them ever since then. It's the original stillness is Buddha nature. So we're talking in this poem using the term Buddha. If this was Dogen, I feel fairly certain he'd use the expression Buddha nature. Just to make sure we're clear that it's not some iconic figure. Because the original stillness is Buddha. Now, right here, right here. Or as Ben expresses it, this original stillness is always here. And that's basically the point I'm trying to get across. I think just within the past week or so, I had occasion to reference the Zen exchange between Dongshan's teacher Yunyan and his Dharma brother Dao Wu. It's often titled The One Who Isn't Busy. It's about sweeping and somebody making the comment, too busy. And Yunyan responding to that, saying, you should know there's one who isn't busy. There's one who's still. This primordial, original stillness. And it's always here. So the one who isn't busy is always here. And that's when I'm teaching meditation, the point I try to get across is that people can always access it. They can find it because it's there. They're not trying to create it. That, oh my gosh, if I do these steps, then I could get there. No, you just have to see it right now. And it's easier to still the mind than most people would believe. Just this power of concentration, samadhi, just to be able to let go of whatever it is that's coming up and making you feel anxious and come back to something and put your mind there. And you access stillness. This is the silent in Hongzha's silent illumination. He could have called it still illumination. It's pointing to the same thing. Or as Ben puts it, in our lives, we travel, sufferings and joys come and go, and we can also realize that we have always been right here, wherever you are. You're always right here. So that was a teaching Reb Anderson had for the driver that got him to retreat he did here in Cleveland when she got lost. She was obviously pretty anxious about that. It's her and Reb. She doesn't know where she's at. She's going, oh, I'm lost. He tried to reassure her, no, you're not. We're right here. And to recognize the profoundness of that, how that applies to us within our lives. Because a lot of times we feel like we're lost. We don't know where we're going. With no direction home. So to be able to find this original stillness and recognize I'm right here. And being supported by this vast web of interdependence, coming back to the Huayan teachings. And with a small modicum of attention on my part, I'll navigate this. Whether it's in the operation of a vehicle to get me to a destination, or a different type of travel to a different type of destination. Maybe one that's not so clear cut is getting to a Zen center, getting to some accomplishment you're working towards, and traveling the path to that and feeling lost. But you're right here, right here. The teaching of just taking care of what's right here. Because that's all you can take care of. Through that act, it's radiating out across time and space. But where I can act is right here, right now. And it's important that we see it that way and we act accordingly. And this is true no matter how powerful we are. The 3 a.m. ravings of a certain leader who is probably in his pajamas firing off executive orders. It's impacting the whole globe, but it's taking place right there in that moment. Taking care of that moment is taking care of many beings, using taking care in a very broad sense, having an impact. But that's how it works. Whether we lead very simple lives or very, very connected, powerful lives, it always emanates from right here and now. Always. And it radiates out. So a spiritual path, and certainly Zen, it's pretty commonplace to find people on that path, people committed to that path, as manifesting stillness in their lives. That the living of a simpler life. And the living of a life that's devoted to caring. Just as the Pope has demonstrated in recent comments of his. And one thing Ben comments that kind of sets bodhisattvas apart is that they see the power of Buddha, the Buddha within, that is right here, while others do not. This power that I'm speaking of. The power of, from this stillness comes clarity. And from clarity, we can practice caring, compassion, and do it wholeheartedly and rooted in our practice. So wisdom, generosity, morality, perseverance, meditation. all the aspects of this path. Bodhisattvas see the power of Buddha that's right here. The universality of this. And uses a quote from the Flower Garland Sutra. There's not a single sentient being who is not fully endowed with the knowledge of Buddha. Now that's a statement that most people would look at and go, well, most beings have never encountered Dharma. How can you make a statement like that? The knowledge of Buddha. They don't know anything about Buddha. But this is where Dogen's use of Buddha nature in place of Buddha is helpful, because it prevents us from getting caught up in this knowledge of a particular individual, a particular teaching. It's a particular characteristic of our being, which is why, just by virtue of being sentient beings, we're fully endowed with the knowledge of Buddha, our true nature, because that's who we are, what we are. So, as the Zen saying goes, and Dogen used this, to be a person of suchness, you practice suchness here and now. And suchness is here and now. That's what constitutes it, what comes together in this moment, everything. So prajna is at the core of suchness. It's there. So all we need to do is see it, awaken to it. But by virtue of being a sentient being, we come endowed with the knowledge of our true nature. So everybody the only thing that's missing is this arising of bodhicitta, the impulse to investigate this great matter, to find it. But what causes that to come forth is because this does lie within each individual. So, in various ways, it will be like there's a knocking at the door. And the response to that knocking at the door doesn't necessarily mean they're going to find the nearest Buddhist group and go knocking on their door. No. They could do any of a number of different things in response. But there will be a knocking at the door. Even if the person does not acknowledge it, does not respond to it, there are knockings at the door. And another comment of Ben's, I think, helps to highlight the truth of this a little further, where he says the sphere of mind is the sphere of Buddha. So now we can maybe begin to see how everybody does have this Buddha nature, because it's the equivalent of the sphere of mind. There's no separation between that and the sphere of Buddha. Both are boundless. Hence the Zen's teaching that ordinary mind is the way, the Buddha way. The sphere of mind here is not some purified, rarefied state of mind. In our tradition, the sphere of mind is just ordinary mind. Hence the statement that there's not a single sentient being who is not fully endowed with the knowledge of Buddha, because it's ordinary mind we're talking about here. Before they go through training and practice regimens and all that. Before all that. The sphere of mind is the sphere of Buddha. And both are measureless and boundless, he says. And we know this from our own practice. Otherwise, how could the practice of Zazen possibly yield insights into our true nature? Impossible. Couldn't happen. But the sphere of mind is the sphere of Buddha. So we can thereby gain this direct insight into the truth of our Buddha nature and the fact that all beings are also so endowed, that this is actually the character of our existence, of the entire universe, of everything that is. And again, back to the Huayan teachings. Everything is interdependent. Everything is empty. There's nothing that falls outside of that. Even the teaching of emptiness itself is empty. What, just by its title, could easily be taken as the most profound book ever written, The Emptiness of Emptiness. It calls to my mind, I think it might have been his final recording, Leonard Cohen. Is it dark enough for you? And in the context of shunyata, is it empty enough for you? The emptiness of emptiness is kind of the final emptying out. The last thing you might attach to is gone. Measureless and boundless. So actually, rather than being nihilistic, this sense of the emptiness of all things, measureless and boundless, it's like gazing out into space, measureless and boundless. And while nihilism might be one takeaway from that because we're so tiny and insignificant. But the other takeaway, possibly, is, wow, to be part of such a vast universe. And I'm here. And it's all coming through me. And everybody else too, not just me uniquely, but we all individually contain that measurelessness and boundlessness. So, and of course, by emptiness, we mean no inherent nature, no fixed nature. This is what the interdependence of Huayan and of the Flower Garland Sutra is based upon. No inherent nature, other than this emptiness, all the way down. So Ben expresses this as we can see through all the divisions and see a seamless stillness. And that is Sandokai. Seeing through all the divisions, all the separations into this and that. The very existence of separation. This is not that, and so on. We can see through it and see within it, grounding it, this seamless stillness. So there are all these divisions, but they're not inherent, which is the way we take them. And we build upon that sense of inherence and make them even more inherent so that we can better separate ourselves from others. We kind of seem to thrive on that, creating this sense of inherent existence. And in the process, then, completely losing sight of the seamless stillness, which is what this final verse is about. So Ben brings up a paradox of Mahayana. I think we're all familiar with, but it's always good to revisit it and have a few words to say about it. And that's the paradox that you are already in nirvana and you can practice to be free from samsara. It's the paradox that Dogen wrestled with, that we are Buddha nature already. So why do we practice? What's the possible point? But the paradox of Mahayana is, as Dogen discovered as well, is that, yeah, you are already in nirvana and you can practice to be free from samsara. You do practice, even though you already have Buddha nature, are Buddha nature. And that wonderful imagery at the end of Genjo Koan of Zen Master Baoje fanning himself. And the monk coming up and saying, Master, the nature of wind is permanent and there's no place it doesn't reach. In other words, nirvana. Why then do you fan yourself? And Baoje gives him a reply. Even though you understand the nature of wind is permanent, you still aren't so clear about its reaching everywhere. And the monk then says, what is the meaning of that? And Baoje just kept fanning himself, practicing. Seeing our practice as comparable to fanning ourselves. So this is a really key fundamental paradox of Mahayana, that all beings are Buddha nature. And yet practice is of the utmost importance. Both those are true. But both those are vital parts of this way, this spiritual path. And we'll be looking at this aspect of practice beginning actually Saturday, when we have some introductory comments on living by vow, because living by vow is our practice. Even the chant we do before the Dharma talk. I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. We're taking vows left and right. So by studying Shahaku's book, hopefully that will become we'll become more deeply aware of all of these vows and how they actually help guide our practice. They are so important. So in that sense, maybe more looking with a view ahead to living by vow, more so than Ben's book. But Ben uses this quote by Maya Angelou, who said, "Everything influences each of us. And because of that, I try to make sure that my experiences are positive." And this is we could see hopefully how vow fits right in there. How everything influences each of us. So the vows we take, they influence each of us in different ways, because we all have our unique paths, but they influence us. And they're one way to help be sure that our experiences are positive. And maybe even more importantly, that our actions are positive. And positive it's one of those tricky terms. Wholesome, some teachers think, is a far preferable term, and I tend to agree with that assessment. To lead a wholesome life in both the quality of our experiences and the quality of our activities. And living by vow can be very helpful as a guidepost. And another point that I wanted to look at a bit here, because I think it's also important, where Ben comments that Yue Song's text does not focus on suffering and healing. Because, of course, the original first Dharma talk of the Buddha was about suffering and healing. And the Four Noble Truths within the Theravadan tradition is kind of like the core Dharma teaching. Right view is from the Eightfold Path is really seen by that tradition as consisting of the Four Noble Truths. That's right view. So that is the path, and that's focusing on suffering and healing, dukkha and the cessation of it. But that's not really the Mahayana path so much. It's not that we don't speak about those things and don't look at them in similar ways, but they don't form the core the way it does within the Theravadan tradition. Prajna, so the teachings on emptiness And the reason for that is because there was this understanding that actually, if we see the true nature of reality, that's our release from dukkha. So among the paramitas, prajna is the principal one. And then compassion, which is also at the heart of Mahayana practice, becomes the flip side of prajna. Prajna and compassion are seen as being identical. Compassion is simply active prajna. Prajna informing our normal activities. Because prajna involves clear seeing of the interdependence of all things. And if we have that insight, then compassion is just a natural outgrowth. It doesn't require analysis or further training. It naturally comes up. As long as we have a clear understanding of the nature of our existence and all other beings. And revisiting some of the earlier lines that we've studied in some detail of the Song of Dharma Nature, Yui Song's text invites us to see that within one is all. The one is all and all is one that we spent a couple of weeks looking at. And that nirvana is here, as we're kind of touching on again here tonight. And that our aspiration for awakening is precious. And in seeing that, our activities will be guided by that. Whether we're leading monastic lives or lay lives, doesn't matter. That the aspiration for awakening, for Bodhi, is precious. And that manifests by how we live our lives. So it is practice. Nurturing, cultivating self and others. And that becomes so precious. Or as Ben puts it, focusing on compassion, that our capacity to be compassionate is a gift that always arrives if we care to open it. And the connection of wisdom and compassion, just seeing what is here. And then in parentheses, wisdom is compassion. There's no separation between the two. And of course, we know from Busho Lan's text that we read not too long before taking up Ben's book. To be compassionate is to be with suffering. Because he spends a fair amount of time in his book talking about this practice of being with suffering rather than turning away from it, which is our normal propensity. Don't want to deal with suffering, especially not suffering of others. We turn our gaze. Don't want to be there. So an important part of the practice is just this: to gain experience in being with suffering and not have this compulsion to turn away from it. that suffering is part of life as samsara. And the bodhisattva way is not escaping samsara. It's remaining right there, right in the muddy water. And we're all close out, which is pretty much where Ben closed out the chapter and therefore the book. And this, I think, is another great segue into our upcoming study of living by vow. He says that in the final pages of the Flower Garland Sutra, the Avatamsaka, we find this verse: as long as earth exists, as long as all beings exist, as long as acts and afflictions exist, so long will my vow remain. That's the Bodhisattva vow. This is the heart of Mahayana. Mahayana is about the Bodhisattva, but Bodhisattva does not enter into the Theravadan tradition. There was one Bodhisattva, Shakyamuni Buddha. And in Mahayana, there's myriad bodhisattvas in myriad realms, just to instill within us the understanding that bodhisattvas are everywhere. It's not limited to any one particular individual. So this stillness can be seen as kind of the cultivation of a life of just ongoing compassionate action. Serving other beings. And our own cultivation is part of that package. But it's not a self-centered practice. It's not. That's not the Mahayana way. So that understanding is at the heart of the Huayan philosophy, the teachings on interdependence. And as we now look to turn our attention to Shahaku's living by vow, we'll see how all of these chants we do, which are principally about vow, how they guide us on this bodhisattva path of compassion, of caring, and of the wisdom that's essential to being compassionate. Because compassion is not sympathy. That's just a sentiment, that's a feeling. Compassion is wisdom. It's the ability to effectively respond, to help others. I mean, sentiment in some scenarios can be helpful, but the thing is, it can also become harmful. It can become detrimental. Whereas wisdom in compassion, one can retain clarity of understanding and clarity in terms of seeing a particular situation and being able to respond effectively with it. If we become overly sentimental about it, it just kind of, it's generally not helpful compared to the ability to simply, because of wisdom, to have this natural response of caring and taking action. So it's also setting up, and that's why, within Shahaku's book, we have chapters on the Heart Sutra and Sandokai, two of the most important wisdom teachings that are in our chant book. And they're there because they relate to our practice of vow. The teachings within those two, really important. So that we can, when we practice compassion, that we can do it well. We can do it well. And and do it with the firm awareness that we're in accord with the nature of reality. And not to be because we will find that others have a whole different view of the nature of reality. So things like greed, for instance, could be seen as, well, that's the nature of reality, is to exercise greed, to accumulate more. And that's good for everybody. I mean, that's a core belief for a pretty good size segment of the population. So
Adam Smith.
yeah, although it's even Adam Smith wasn't that cutthroat. In fairness to him, he had far more compassion, we'll say, towards some of the failings of a free market, whereas I think it's almost gotten purified these days. So we're going to encounter, these kinds of worldviews. So it's important. And this is one of the great values I find in this tradition, is that it's simplicity in terms of laying out dharma points. And because of this teaching of interdependence we've been looking at for these past 30 weeks, I guess, the fact that, we have to take action for the benefit of all beings. We make that vow, but the Huayan teaching is saying that's the nature of reality because of interdependence. If we're just serving ourselves, actually, it's a disservice even to ourselves. And it is. I mean, I remember there was a book some years back called Spirit Level, and it looked at nations across the globe and levels of inequality, and then compared them to things like drug usage and suicides and percentage of populations with health care, insurance, and so on and so forth, quality of life things. And it found, no surprise, that nations with greater inequality were pretty far down in measures like that. And what was surprising was, you would think, oh, it was the disadvantaged people, of course, that are committing suicide, getting addicted to drugs, and so on and so forth. No, it was also, they were certainly among them, but equally so, the privileged were also falling prey to those ills of society, because it's not the nature of reality. I mean, things are interdependent, and actually doing these studies in other countries just kind of bore that out. So it's really fascinating. Kimberly, you had a question or comment?
Well, did you just, just a little bit back, did
Yeah.
you say that the nature of reality is different for everybody?
Not the nature,
Right.
but
I'm hearing wrong.
yeah. Because the nature, things like interdependence and emptiness and no self, and cause and effect, these things are part of everybody's existence. But because of cause and effect, karma, we could say, everybody has their own individual path.
Okay.
So they're both, it's then that's Sandokai. It's the coming together of unity and difference. We get caught up in difference. We seem to thrive on that.
The nature of reality is, I'm reluctant to just make a statement, but
Well, that's good because
the nature of reality is emptiness, is interdependent, is suchness,
and John's point is good because Old Testament, God is
prajna.
Yeah.
That brings me. I'm thinking. Okay, prajna. Does prajna also include the not so pleasant, or is prajna wholesome?
Well, wholesome.
But it's like I'm trying.
Wholesome is built out of the term whole. So there's nothing. See, we think of wholesome in the sense of dualistic understanding. Well, if there's wholesome, there's unwholesome. But the wholesome that I'm speaking of, and other teachers that use it in place of terms like positive, is this sense of the whole.
I never, until just now, ever took it like that.
Yeah.
I always take it as a dualistic term.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm just kind of struggling with some confusion in my mind right now.
Yeah.
Not that, I mean, I'm pretty much, I'm not to say I'm not confused. I mean, I'm confused. There's just a lot. And sometimes I see it, like I see all the interconnection, and then I just try to get so wrapped up in understanding and terminology and how to get it across.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate actually, because the terminology, I mean, it just comes with study. So if you study, it'll come. The paramita of patience is the best one for getting through that. So, that's why we don't have pop quizzes or final exams or any of that.
I'm being like this because I'm, on the one hand, I'm like, oh, Dharma rain. So, I don't need to get all this right now. And lately, I feel this sort of inner pressure or something, or just something. I can't describe it.
It'll come. You'll be reading something and a term, a particular Dharma term, you might decide, this is the time I need to really drill down into this. Let it, because
wholesome just means of the whole.
Yeah. Well, that's when.
Okay, I'll stop talking. I have always taken that term as a dualistic term.
And that's
like a wholesome moralistic thing. when I hear
Yeah,
in a dharma
that's the
talk.
way it's normally used.
Okay. Well, I got a little light bulb.
Yeah.
going on.
But you have to, you probably recognize by now that Zen is pretty good at taking terms and using them in different ways than we're accustomed to seeing them used.
Okay.
And that this is a perfect example. Because otherwise, why would we bother using that term in place of something like positive? It doesn't accomplish anything. But if we use wholesome in this sense of for the benefit of all beings, in other words, we're focused on the whole.
It's so funny. It's just like, wow, I'm just like really,
Yeah,
wow, I've been so dense. I've always taken that as no moralistic.
that's the way it's normally used
It's so fascinating.
in our uh, in our language game, as Wittgenstein would put it. Our language game generally uses wholesome in that fashion.
Okay.
So yeah. So we all players of the game kind of tend to gravitate towards that usage of it. But one thing in Zen, that's part of this openness. Be open to other ways of using those words. That when we get it, we can really see that use of the term and go, wow, that's beautiful. Wholesome now all of a sudden becomes this dharma-rich term that excludes nothing, including what we used to think of as unwholesome, because we've transcended that duality through our creative reuse of that term. So
I wish my mom were still alive. I could tell her what a good, wholesome person I turned out
yeah. I'm sure she'd have a nice reward for you too. Mark, yeah.
So where it says our capacity to be compassionate is a gift that always arrives if we care to open it, just seeing what is here is compassion. So my question, I guess, is compassion in the eye of the beholder? Because one person, for just as an example, one person can see an immigrant and feel compassionate towards that immigrant and feel that they're welcome here regardless of their status. Another person could see an immigrant and think that's an illegal alien and we need to get them all out of the country and do it and think that they're also being compassionate by saving our country or whatever.
Right.
So you have different.
You raise a good point. Yeah, but what I'd like to do is cast their position a little more sympathetically, because what they're appealing to quite often with their position is the notion that immigrants are taking jobs away from Americans. So they would see themselves acting out of compassion for the good old American worker who's losing their jobs or finding their wages are being depressed by immigrants who come in, either take their job or are willing to work for less. So they can also be seen as being compassionate. So it's important in our practice to be able to open our minds to see these different positions. And then this is where prajna and clear understanding, we have to look at what is the truth. So the studies get made about what is the impact. And so it kind of compels us, you might say, to be informed if that's an issue we care about. Because the tendency is and social media has really exacerbated it, you kind of have your position and you no longer open to any other ways of seeing things. Because everything that you hear, because of the tunnels that get created by social media and mass media for that matter, are just feeding that particular way of seeing things. We need to be able to see it more broadly and understand how somebody else could be seen as having a compassionate response, but taking a different position than what the one you or I might have. Because the only way we can really effectively communicate on this is with that kind of understanding. I mean, I was studying debate at an early age, and that's kind of cardinal rule number one. You can't debate anybody unless you understand their position. You've got to know their position at least as well as you understand your own, maybe even better. It's really key. So, but it serves our purpose just to kind of demonize others and just short shrift. There no need to pay any attention to it. But we need to be able to really, get on a stage and debate passionate advocates for the other side. It's important. Because that's how, in the political arena, that's how the mythical middle, the moderates, the independents, that's how you're going to reach, those voters are going to be won or lost by that ability. If it's just, slinging mud, that just turns everybody off. Anything else? Mike?
I'm just to circle back. The Shambhala Dictionary of Buddhism and Zen,
Yeah.
that was like a revelation of a secret decoder ring. Because as I'd be bumbling along through a text, still do, I'd be like, para, what the, who the, shada, what? And boy, that thing's just looking a little dog-eared or whatnot. But it's a great little reference decoder ring to have handy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I highly recommend it. I've got a copy that's probably in similar condition, and it's gotten a lot of use.
You also bookmarked it today.
Yes.
I have it on.
Okay, yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, well, let's go ahead and chant out then. I vow to myself and to each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings, to live on earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume, to draw strength and guidance from the living earth the ancestors, the future generations, and my brothers and sisters of all species, to support others in our work for the world, and to ask for help when I need it, to pursue a daily practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows. All right, well, we'll be back here Saturday for our full day of practice, our Zazenkai, and we'll kind of be launching into living by vow, just kind of some introductory comments. So, hope you can join us.